Oh, Regina.
I don't see us live yet though.
Okay.
Now we're
Love
live.
the glasses.
Hi, ladies. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
I don't know about you, but I have been on Zooms all day, but this is the only one that I can say I was super, super excited and looking forward to, even though the other ones have been great, I have to say, and they tied into our topic tonight, but this is the one I always look forward to. I love, love, love being with my sister friends. So I am hoping everyone out there is listening tonight because we have a major topic to close out Black History Month and move into Women's History Month. We are talking about Black women in politics. Yes. So, I mean, just last month we saw a historic event when Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, my sorority sister, was inaugurated. And so tonight is just going to be spectacular. We have some really wonderful special guests and looking forward to this discussion. I am Cara Dunstan. I'm going to turn over the introductions to Juanita.
Happy Friday Eve, ladies, into the Facebook world out there. I'm Juanita, AKA Q.
Cecilia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cecilia Horton-Jones, better known as CC. So welcome to Good Girlfriends.
Regina.
It's my turn.
Yes.
Hi. Look. Happy Friday Eve. I love that, Q. You say that. And my name is Regina Clay, and I'm going to tell you about the dangling earrings challenge in a minute or later in the program, but I'm going to talk about it for a minute, but I'm glad to have my earrings on tonight. Am I introducing our guests, two of our guests? Okay, so I am so excited and happy to introduce and glad to call both of these ladies my friends. So first I'm going to start with my forever mayor, Sheila Dixon. And yes, I lived in Baltimore City, so she was my mayor. But I first met Sheila at the church where we worshiped. Sheila is on the stewardess board and she is a servant leader. And Sheila at that time, she was a council person and she was just rocking and rolling. She was always in the community, always giving back, always doing everything. And I was like, I've got to get to know her better. So Sheila is part of my story when I talk about my story, because when I felt that I was called to public service to run for elected, Sheila had decided she was going to run for president of city council, and I was going to run for her seat because I lived in the district where she was going to run. And everybody was like, well, you can't run until you talk to Sheila. And I was like, oh, but I don't know how to approach her. And, everybody's like, oh, and I said, but then I asked her, I just said to her one day, and I think we were in the bathroom upstairs, Sheila, on the third floor at Bethel. And I said, I really would like to go to lunch with you and talk to you about running for public office. And she said, okay. And we went to lunch. And from that moment on, nobody could talk to me about Sheila because I knew her personally. And she took the time to talk to me and mentor me. And from that moment on, every campaign she has ever run, I have always supported her through and through. And I'm just glad to have her here, my forever mayor. She was the first woman elected mayor of Baltimore City. And she was African-American woman. So I'm welcoming Sheila. I'm going to introduce Candace. Candace is the sister that I never had. And I have lots of sisters, but Candace just became that one. Candace actually was my supervisor also at one time, but Candace is a mover and shaker. We call her the Olivia Pope We call her the Olivia Pope because she will resolve an issue. She will resolve a problem. Currently, she is the treasurer for the first woman who is running for comptroller for the state of Maryland. Did I get that correct?
She's
Okay.
the only woman and yeah, she would be, yes. She's the
Yes,
only
she would be
woman.
the first woman
Yeah.
as the comptroller. And so she's serving as her treasurer, and she served on the Howard County Democratic Central Committee. And the reason that I'm on the Howard County Democratic Central Committee is because of Candace. And she was the highest elected vote getter for that. But she's worked on many campaigns, worked on lots of committees, and is just dedicated. So I'm happy to have her here as well.
Awesome.
So hello, everyone. I'm Jeanette. Welcome back to our virtual living room. I'm going to jump right into the introduction. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce my very good sister friend, who too, she's also, Regina, part of my story, because we raised our children together, and she was very influential in terms of me becoming an adult woman, right? So when I first met her, I was a lot younger. And so I learned a lot. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Blondel Reynolds Brown, who was a councilwoman, and I should say forever councilwoman in Philadelphia. She too was a servant of the people. It still is. And her main focus, though, was for the welfare of women and children. And so the city is eternally grateful to her. We love her and honor her. And I'm so happy to have her here with us today.
And we've been blessed to have her visit with us multiple times on Good Girlfriends too. So we are thankful for that.
So now there was someone else here, my line sister, who just popped. She'll be back. When she comes, I'll interrupt and, introduce her properly too. But normally I say to our audience, to our returning girlfriends and to new ones that come to sit on the couch, that we are not experts. But tonight, for this conversation, we have indeed brought in experts. We are blessed to have both of you here, all three of you, I'm sorry, here with us. And, cannot wait to hear from you and learn from you about your journey in politics. So with that, I will turn it back over to Cara.
Yeah, so if you ladies wouldn't mind, if you could just give us a little bit of your story as to how you got your start into politics, what motivated you and how did you start? That would be great. Sheila, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So my introduction to politics started when I was born and raised in Baltimore, tried to leave, try to join the Peace Corps. It was a waiting list during the 70s. So I realized that I was destined to be here in Baltimore. And it actually started when I was in elementary school, when I had a teacher at that time, I went to school 87. I had a teacher who really put down the Black children in our class. And that was the beginning of my decision to want to be a school teacher, because I said that I would never, ever put a child down, and that each child in my class would be unique, and that each child would be treated very special. So of course I went to Towson State University, even though I hung out at Morgan and other Black institutions, but Towson gave me money. I had to go where they gave me money for my undergrad. And they also had a very good early childhood program. So I was student teaching in South Baltimore. It was called Pigtown, where the pigs used to come through to be slaughtered in open space. And at that time, I was also very active at Bethel AME Church. And there was an organization called the Henry McNeil Turner Society. And there was some legislation that Kwesi Mfume introduced as a council person to divest in South Africa any retirement money during apartheid. And that kind of was the beginning of my involvement, because I also knew that I wanted to make changes policy-wise for kids in school, children in elementary school. So make a long story short, I actually had connected with he's passed on Delegate Pete Rollins, who was a mentor of mine at the state level, who had me participate and be active in Anthony Robinson. If you ever heard that name before, he was very involved in Congressman Mitchell's program that was established about minority businesses. Well, we worked on his campaign, 2 of them. Probably only 2 other than recently where someone lost and Anthony lost, but that was my beginning of being involved. And then Kwaisi had recommended me to finish out his term, but the council person at that time wanted someone else. So he encouraged me to run for public office. And so at that point, being involved in so many other things, I decided to run for city council. It was 21 of us. It was Baltimore at that time had 3 council persons per district. And I ran for one of the 3 seats. And I think it was a grassroots campaign, and that was the beginning of really trying to make a difference in Baltimore City Public Schools, as well as the district that I represented, which was the 4th district at that time, where it was really neglected by its elected officials. And so that was my involvement in getting involved in politics. Wow. And through Pete Rollins, to Kwaisi and Fume were really the 2 main mentors, other than people from my church, Bishop, my buddy, Bishop Bryant, his encouragement, and Reverend Cecilia Bryant through the women's ministry. So it was those 4 individuals that really made the impact for me to get involved in politics. Because I'm the type of person, that's why Regina probably didn't know how to approach me, because sometimes people can misread me, where I'm really an introvert. I'm a shy person. I could stay to myself to do what I needed to do. But, in politics, you got to be out there. You have to be visible. You have to touch people, and so that kind of changed that introvert person that I was, to really begin to see where God was kind of taking my path.
That's awesome.
So before we go on to the next person, I just want to introduce I have to call her like one of my heartbeats. So this is my line sister. This is my forever sister friend. We grew up together. We went to college together. So we were friends from the age of 18 until, I won't say how old we are now, but seasoned. So I feel I'm blessed to have her. We're so proud of her as a line, as a chapter, as a sorority. This is Honorable Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman. So I'm blessed to have 2 of my most favorite sorors in the house, Blondel and Alicia. So I'm so happy to have you with us, Sans. Thank you I know your schedule is crazy, but I'm so happy. We're glad to have you here as we talk about powerful women in politics. You're one of the most powerful and influential that I know. So we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Yes. So Alicia, we were introducing our special guest, which you are one of them, in sharing the story of how you got started in politics and what motivated you. We were going to move on to Blondel now, and then we'll come over to you, but that's what we're talking about.
Great.
So good evening, ladies. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So let me first thank Jeanette Harris. She always has a way of filling up my heart when it comes to these type of experiences. I'm delighted to be invited back as one of your featured guests tonight. And I will honor the duty and the homework I've done, Madam Principal Jeanette Harris. In short, I always wanted to be a teacher, elementary school teacher, and ultimately the principal of an elementary school. But a major pivot for me happened in the early 1990s. Short story is I came home too because I really wanted to go in the Peace Corps, but my mother insisted that I come home because she was a widow with 7, left alone. And I was the oldest and had to set the example. So I came home and began to start my career as just that, an elementary school teacher. Graffiti appeared on this one piece of dirt that I own. I was an unhappy 23-year-old and look for who's the leader in the community, to discover there was none. So a neighborhood leader said to me, you know, you're complaining, maybe you should be what's called a committee person, which is the lowest rung of the Democratic City Committee here in Philadelphia. So it started out as just that, at the bottom rung of the Democratic City Committee ladder, and was picked up or observed by then the state rep Shaka Fatah, who noticed my volunteerism and said, we like what you represent and who you are. We want to invite you to join this organization. So I did, and my first big footing was as a delegate to the 1988 convention, Democratic National Convention. So I've been to every single Democratic National Convention since 1988, except two. But recruited by State Representative Fatah, building my own career in the education space. But then a slot opened up for him, a slot opened up on his staff in Harrisburg, where he needed a legislative aide. And the picture was as follows: 50 state senators, 48 did not look like me, and there were no women. And so I complained to now state senator Fatah. He said, don't complain about it, be about it. So I left the education space and began to travel back and forth to Harrisburg for a solid year. And in that space as a legislative aide, there were 50 legislative aides, none were Black and none were female.
Wow. All
All white men, which was startling for me. And again, I complained to Senator Fatah. He said, don't complain about it, be about it. So I thought about running, and because at that point, I'd done everything you could do in a campaign as a volunteer. And I often tell young people, I was not a volunteer, I was an outstanding volunteer. So when folks needed things done, they knew they could count on me, rain, sleet, or high water. And if I said I was going to do it, I honored my word and followed through and did the job. And so that too resonated with Senator Fatah. So I decided I would run for city council in 1995 as a newly married woman. And at the end of the day, I lost by less than 2 votes per division. So I 1.6 vote per division was my loss. And so 4 years later, now with a 3-year-old, I ran again in 1999 with my 3-year-old on my hip. And I took her with me to every single event in the city of Philadelphia. Wherever 2 people were gathered, Blondel and Brielle were there. And so at the end of that race, out of 52 candidates, I came in number 3. So I went from number 6 in 1995 to number 3 in 1999. And there are only 5 slots, and had the good fortune to serve in city council for 20 years. The last 8 of those 20 years, I was voted by my peers to be in leadership. And so for 8 years of those 20 years, I was the only woman in leadership out of the 5, again, voted on by your peers. For 16 of those 20 years, I was the only woman at large. So what does that mean? The city charter says there will be 17 city council members of the 5th largest city in the country. 10 are district council members, which means they represent about 250,000 folk in terms of real estate. The 7 that are left, 5 are Democratic council members. So I was one of 5 Democrats and the only female for 16 years. The 2 remaining ones are Republican. And so for 20 years, as Jeanette said, I was very unapologetic about being a voice for women. And when I saw Black women being diminished in government, I spoke up about it. That was my reputation, and I was okay with that. We passed, we were successful getting major legislation passed, 2 of which I'll mention that I'm most proud of. In my freshman year, I was, the city was building new stadiums, and that's a good thing. We need economic development because we need jobs. But my concern was we're giving these ball players what they need. They're very, wealthy ball players, all this money. We were giving both teams over $700 million. And my concern was, what are we doing for these children at these dilapidated rec centers? Mm-hmm. And so after a year, I was able to negotiate with the Phillies and the Eagles with Mayor John Street serving as my coach. for that solid year. And at the end of the day, we were able to negotiate a deal where $1 million per team per year for 30 years goes to children. That fund is now 10 years old. It has about $20 million in it, so it grows as it's giving. And for another 10 years, they'll be able to support children's funding here in the city. And that's really a Cliff Notes version, because it was much more awkward than that. The second piece of legislation I continue to be excited about is that dining in the city of Philadelphia will never, ever be the same, because when you walk into any restaurant that is a chain restaurant with 5 or more locations from around the country, so be it Starbucks or Wawa, call the chain restaurants. My legislation said that there must be menu nutritional information on those menus, because when I thought about doing that, I was a Robert Wood Johnson Fellow along with the mayor from Baltimore. That's where I actually know her from. And obesity was on the rise in the country, and obesity amongst African-American children was a crisis. And when we have children who are overweight, we know that leads to type 2 diabetes, it cuts their lifespan short, et cetera, et cetera. So it took me 2 years to find 9 votes to get that legislation passed, because the Restaurant Association, both locally, statewide, and nationally, were very upset about it. But we were able to ultimately, with me making some amendments, get that legislation passed to the notice of the White House. In fact, First Lady Michelle Obama came to the city of Philadelphia to commend the Mayor Nutter at that point, and me on that legislation. And somewhere in that, President Obama's healthcare legislation, there's language that talks about menu labeling and menu nutritional information. So now it's becoming the norm. It's no longer the exception. And the last piece is there were 31 cities around the country that had a mayor's commission for women. The city of Philadelphia did not. And so again, with a lot of work, we now have a mayor's commission for women that focuses strictly on improving the lives of women of all spaces, all genders, all irrespective of where they come from. Because in government, we know that women have to walk on water, and Black women have to walk on water and fly to be equal to the white man. So be it salary or be it serving on boards, Black women represent 1% of corporate boards in the country. 1% of corporate for-profit boards. In the city of Philadelphia, anyone who wants to do business with the city now are required to answer the questionnaire that talks about the demographics of their board. So those are the 3 pieces of legislation that I'm most proud of, because they will have longevity for a long time. And that's my short story. Thank you, Jeanette.
That's awesome. That is an incredible story. And you touched on corporate boards, which is going to lead me to Candace Dotson-Reed. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and tell us your story about how you got your start in politics and what motivates you. And I heard corporate boards, that made me think of you, Candace. We had this discussion amongst
Yes,
ourselves.
no, I just testified in Annapolis on that yesterday. So I appreciate you coming to me, and thank you for having me on here. I am like completely honored to be on here with Assemblywoman Hyman and Councilwoman Brown and my forever mayor. I'm not from Baltimore City, didn't live in Baltimore City, but still my forever mayor, Mayor Dixon. And so thank you for having me. My story is a little different because my first foray into politics was not elected office. And the story that I often tell is interesting in that I was very good friends with someone named Ken Ullman, who I knew we grew up together in Howard County, and our brothers actually played soccer together. We became good friends as like middle schoolers, like 11-year-olds who were dragged to the soccer field because our brothers were playing. And I can remember even at that point, him talking about politics and like, we were following, the state politics at that point, and national politics, of course. And he's like, I really want to be the governor or the president or the whatever, right? Like at 11 years old. And I was like, okay, whatever, that sounds good. You seem interesting and cool and smart. And fast forward to some years later, and he ran for county council in Howard County and said, I'm interested in doing this. can you help me? You know a lot of people. Can we get out the vote? And I said, sure, yeah, of course. His values were aligned with my values and what he wanted to do in Columbia and Howard County. And at that same time, I was also working sort of as a community organizer with Columbia Foundation, and then later with the Foundation, Columbia Association, and then later with the Columbia Foundation. And then he decided to run for county executive in Howard County and won, and called me up one day and said, Candace, I need you on my team. I think we can do some really great things in Howard County. And I think you should join me. And so I joined his team, and for 7.5 years, almost 8 years, I was on his team, and fortunate enough to do some great things, both on the Howard County government side and the way in which we tried to be innovative and creative and work on sort of the big challenges that we deal with in Howard County and the state, frankly, and then also certainly on the political side with his campaign and a number of other campaigns in Howard County. And so that was my foray into politics. When I was in Howard County, working in Howard County government, I also decided, as Regina mentioned, to run for Howard County Democratic Central Committee, which was an interesting thing, but I took it seriously and ran it like I was running a council person campaign or a mayoral campaign, and was fortunate enough to be the top vote getter in Howard County with a lot of support from some really great people, and hopefully did some great things in that position as well. And so a little bit of a different path into politics, but certainly still committed to the work in Howard County, the work in Maryland, and making it the best that we could possibly make it by, looking at innovative solutions to the big challenges that we're dealing with. So, so that's my foray into politics. And now, I work at UMBC now in higher education, but still, you can't ever get rid of the politics bug, right? Like, you can't ever get rid of that. And so, still work on a number of campaigns. Regina was mentioning Brooke Learman's campaign for comptroller, but still, sort of behind the scenes working on a number of campaigns, trying to get good folks elected who are working on these big challenges.
Awesome. And if Alicia comes back, we'll hear her story as well. But I'll just put a little side note in that.
Oh, there she is.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I'm in a Democratic Club Zoom on the other.
You're
We understand that. We understand that multitasking. We understand it.
Yeah, we understand. Well, Alicia, share your story, please.
Give us the Cliff Notes.
So I never planned to run for office. Growing up in Queens, New York, one of probably the most diverse boroughs in this state, if not the country. I, single mother of two, I volunteered for my daughter's school board, it's a community education council in New York City, but to everyone else is known as school boards. And only 3 people elect you. So it's really, you like I think Blondel said, the bottom. So I volunteered. I worked full time for the state education department as an investigator, and I volunteered in the community. And I figured, I went to public school. My daughter's now in public school. I'm going to volunteer. Lo and behold, that volunteering position turned into about 9 years of volunteer work, advocating for 36 schools, over 33,000 children that attend public schools in a predominantly Black district, which is like Jamaica, Queens. Most people probably heard of that. LL Cool J is from here. I'm Run DMC. What I found interesting, just listening to the other women speak, is that they're Black men that helped us, and the Black man helped me, my state senator, who I happened to know volunteered in the community, and I was always aware of the politics, but never got involved. My focus was the children, bringing in resources, working with the New York City Department of Education, the mayor's office to get resources in the district. So when the seat opened up, my predecessor had gotten into some hot water, and his seat was vacated. He was a 22-year incumbent, couldn't run anymore. And a friend of mine said, why don't you run for office? So after some cuss words, and why would anyone do that? And
I know that.
I was like, well, I think they get paid less than I get paid now. And the next, and so he asked me, and I said, I gave him a couple of names of people who I knew were interested in politics. I wasn't one of them. And then the next day I saw my state senator, and he, what he did was, we just turned this other Zoom off. Sorry, guys. He saw me and he says, where do you live? And I was like, Rosedale. What's your, I knew my election district. I knew my elected representatives on the city, state, federal level. And he said, have you ever thought about running for office? And I was like, something is going on if these two men are saying, like, you should think about it. So I called my mom and I prayed on it. And my mom, she's Jamaican. She was like, well, what are you going to do for work? Do they get paid? Are you going to give up a job to get this job? And I ran in fall of 2015. I won by a landslide in the general. I got 97% of the vote. And yeah, I ran for office, and my district is about 130,000 constituents, predominantly Democrats, predominantly Black, predominantly homeowners, which is unique for New York City. I get to say what happens in our state budget, which is over $172 billion. Wow. Even with COVID, I'm sure it'll be more. And this is my 6th session, and I'm now the assistant majority leader of the assembly.
Bravo, bravo.
And some days I say to myself, like, I never prepared for this, but I think it is the education and the relationships and putting my community first, which is what I heard everyone say, prepared me that when the opportunity was there, surprising myself and saying, look what you can do, and coalescing resources and raising $70,000 and talking to everyone and asking everyone for $25. I started like 100 and I worked my way down to 25. You know how to make money, right?
Yes.
Still doing call time, legislation. And I think the biggest bill or piece of legislation that I think gives me satisfaction was my bill for Juneteenth to be celebrated as a state holiday. Awesome. Is a state holiday. Awesome. In the state of New York. And this June will be the first time that we'll observe it as a state. All public buildings and city and state offices will be closed in the state of New York, and because the governor signed my Juneteenth bill. So
congratulations.
Yeah, I think that for me is, there's other bills, but I think that for me will always be like, the biggest deal. And so my daughters, I guess I also showed them, I think there was a part of me being a single mom, like, always thinking like I was less than or not as qualified. And I tell women, especially Black women, like, you just have to believe in yourself and put yourself in a position to challenge. I think at my job, I was like, I need to do something else. I didn't plan to be in education. On the administrative side, I didn't plan it. It was like a job. I had it. I was good at it, but I just knew something had to happen. And this was it. And I'm just grateful every day I get to serve the 29th Assembly District.
Wow,
great story.
What amazing stories. Now I want to go there, right? Because first of all, I heard a thread. I heard education in every single one of your threads of where you kind of got your feet wet, right? Then I also heard, I want to talk about this, the men that helped you. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about the women. How did women support you? Because I know, because you all talked about the men that kind of pushed you there. But I want to talk about once you decided to get there, what was the women's support like? Yeah, especially Black women, other Black women.
So it was, I'll just say this quick. It was a Black woman that tried to talk me out of it, right? She told me why don't you sit this one out, sis, and support this guy? And I think because I was so appalled by what she said, that made me say, you know what, I'm going to run. I don't know how this works. I'll just print copies and put it in people's doors. I had no clue. And because she said that, that was just one Black woman, because I have two really good women that held me through the whole campaign, watched my daughters for me, helped me pick out clothes. So I think Black women we need to help each other more. I feel that's the first thing. And you will find that just because, like we always say, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, we have to remember that there will always be the devil in someone, and they will try to tear you down. But for the ones that support you and you support them, those are the ones that you hold on to and hold dear. And my line sisters have been encouraging, before the seat, during the seat. Now that I have the seat, they always make me feel like, I'm a winner all the time.
She was made for this role. I'm just saying. I've known her since college, so her running and having this seat comes as no surprise to any of us. That her line sisters, of course, but people that knew her from school. Not anybody is surprised.
Great story.
For me, I think that women were involved, but because there weren't a lot of women who were elected at that time. Well, when I came into the council, that was the first time that there were, I think maybe about 5, 6 out of 18 women, and 4 were African American, and the city council president at that time was white. But there were women involved from the campaign aspect of helping you out, volunteering, engage in that respect. It's funny because I don't know about Philadelphia or New York, except for I have a son-in-law who's a New Yorker, and now my daughter's a New Yorker, and they share with me the politics there. But Baltimore is very interesting. Let me put it that way. Instead of us being in support, a lot of times we tend to pull each other down in politics. It's like, when I got involved and engaged in politics, it wasn't about the political piece of it, it was about being a public servant and serving. And so my perspective was a little bit different. I was very naive on the politics side. If I had not been so naive, and I'll never forget my first boyfriend, who I learned karate from, where I say always, when a bad relationship goes bad, there's something good comes out of it, because karate was something that came positive. But he used to say, you're naive. You were sitting on that step. And I when I got into politics, I didn't look at it, analyze it politically. I always looked at it in how a public servant would serve and how it's going to impact the people. So it's up and down as far as women. Now, I have to say, on the council, when I was on the council serving, Vera Hall, who was a council person, Iris Reed was a council person, Agnes Welch, who was a council person, bless her soul, still living at 90-some years old. She wasn't in support of me. She had selected 2 men versus who Kwesi had recommended for his seat. But after she got to know me, she was supportive after she got to understand me. And so during that time, more and more women started getting engaged and involved in politics. But being, as far as support, it wasn't as supportive as I would want it to have been, versus having more men being supported, particularly African-American men. And of course, you always had to prove yourself, because it was an arena of mostly predominantly white males. I mean, I'll never forget when we did redistricting for Baltimore, and the district had changed. We had 65% African-Americans in Baltimore City, but you had a majority whites representing the city. And so the 7 council people who were African-Americans in Baltimore City, we took it upon ourselves to create a caucus to change that, so we could change the makeup of districts, so we could elect a woman in the 3rd district, which was an all-white male district, and a Black in Cherry Hill area, or the 6th district. And so through that process, we were able to elect more women into the city council, and then, on to the state, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, initially it was a challenge, but I think over the years, since more and more women have engaged in getting involved and engaged in the political process, people tend to be more supportive. I went to a white institution, so Towson undergrad and Johns Hopkins for grad. And so if I had, even though I was very supportive of the Deltas, the AKAs, all the sororities, I supported and they supported me. I just never pledged. But, and so through that mechanism during the campaigning time in particular, is where I got a lot of support from different women and women organizations.
Like Mayor Dixon, 20, 25, 30 years ago, the political structure in Philadelphia was predominantly Black men or white men. Very few women had, I won't say had an interest, but aspired, if you will, to move into halls of leadership. And so like Mayor Dixon, state representative who became state senator, who went on to become congressman for Ty, pushed me and nudged me because clearly he saw that I had what some might call the right stuff. Along the way, I met women of a generation ahead of me who I believe I became what they hoped to be or wanted to be, meaning they were 20 years older than me, and they saw in me the opportunity to support a woman who would ultimately move into those halls of leadership. And so I'm pleased to say that while I wasn't pushed by women, once you put your hat in the ring, you discover all sorts of people make the world go round, including older women who really want to see you do well, and some of your peers who clearly want to see you fall. And so when you make a decision to enter the world of electoral politics, nothing is 100%, and which means you'll never have 100% support. It simply doesn't work that way, which means that you have to have a center and a belief and a faith that you bring the right stuff to the table. You're willing to make phone calls ad nauseum, and then learn the policy and build the networks that move you across the finish line. Now that we are here, I'm of the belief, shame on us if we're not building a bench of other young women to bring along. And I'm pleased to say that after serving 20 years in the Philadelphia City Council, let me say this, when I first went to City Council, I was the only woman there with a 3-year-old. When I left City Council, there are 3 women there with children in elementary school. So the paradigm is beginning to shift as we help voters understand that we can do the job. All we need is the chance. And if we earn the stripes and win the race, then we deserve the chance. And so I have made a commitment, and I know 2 of my colleagues who are still there, where they have a bunch of young women that they're training, that you bring them in as a constituent service rep or a legislative aide or your lawyer. And then as opportunities open up, you push them the way someone pushed me. My successor in Philadelphia City Council, I love to tell a story, came to me as a volunteer when she was in 11th grade. And she went on to go to Westchester State University, secured her bachelor's degree, and she wrote me a note on her way to college, and I wrote her back. And we stayed in touch with each other during her undergraduate experience and during her graduate experience. Once she graduated, she reached out to me again to say, can she be a volunteer? Absolutely. We're always looking for volunteers. I mean, that's how you sort of whet the appetite of young people. And she came to me as a volunteer, then as an intern while she was building her career someplace else. When an opportunity opened up on my staff, I, as a rule, elected officials go to first those persons who helped them get there. And so I asked Catherine Gilmore Richardson if she wanted to be a constituent service rep. And so over 10 years, she went from constituent service rep to legislative aide, to legislative director, to staff director, to chief of staff. And when I decided I wanted to leave, I elected to leave because I had 5 successful terms. I wanted, and I wasn't interested in the 6. I'm good after 20 years. She was the first person I approached. I said, this is an opportunity, got the right stuff. You have 10 years in Philadelphia City Council. You're a committee person where you live. Think about it. She went home. I said, have a serious conversation with your husband. That was a Friday. That Sunday night, she called me. She says, Councilwoman, I'm going to take the lead. And so much to the surprise of the Philadelphia Democratic Party structure, we pulled together a team, and she's my successor as the only other Black city councilwoman at large and the youngest and the first millennial to go to Philadelphia City Council. So while it was
Hi,
not that way
everyone.
for us, we really have to pave
It's
the
Alicia
way.
Hyman, Assemblywoman.
Huh?
Sorry, Blondel.
That's all right. That's all right. While it was not that way for us, including Mayor Dixon, we really do have a responsibility to push open the door and then bring some others along, because it ain't easy, and electoral politics ain't for everybody. And so it really takes a mix of a rich skills and intellectual and emotional intelligence to do this in a way where you can be successful, hold on to your values, and not get poisoned by the stuff, because there's a lot of that.
Well,
And so
as a follow up to that, wait, was someone getting ready to say something? Candace,
I'm just going to chime in really quickly and just say I'm so encouraged by what all three ladies said, particularly what the councilwoman just said. You know, we've heard Vice President Harris say, I'm the first, but I don't want to be the last, right? And I think that's like the mentality that we should have moving forward. It has not always been easy. You know, I can tell one quick story, Car, and then I'll stop talking. But Regina Clay and I started something called the African American Community Roundtable in Howard County. And it's made up of African American churches, the sororities and fraternities, social organizations, civic organizations, and the two museums, which is a little random, but it is what we have. And you know, when we first started this, we started this in the Allman, when we were both in the Allman administration. And when we first started it, the harshest critics were our Black sisters. And they said, you know, this won't last. We're not sure if this is the right thing to do. And really what it was about was bringing the community together to advocate for things that matter to us in the Black community in Howard County. And I was like, how can that be bad, right? Like, there's nothing bad about that. Like, let's use our voices collectively to advocate for what our community needs. Happy to say it's still going on. That was 2012 and it's still going on. But sometimes, you know, we are our harshest critics, and I'm encouraged to hear, you know, what everyone has said, and, you know, what our vice president is saying. I think that's where we need to really be committed to, like, how do we lift each other up, and how do we, you know, motivate each other and inspire each other, like Councilwoman Brown was just saying, to take the next step into leadership, and you know, how do we do that together?
Yeah.
You know, that's why one of the things that young people some who got elected this time, some who didn't get elected in the city this time, but who have strived, when I've been approached by young people, and this is females and males, you know, I try to sit down with them and kind of give them the lay of the land, and, you know, try to encourage them despite, you know, win or lose, you know, but to really get out there and get involved, but do it for the right reasons, so that you can make the kind of impact or change in your community. And that's why Blondel mentioned about her 3-year-old. Well, my daughter was born, and she was the first baby born to a council person on the city council. The other couple women that were on there, they had already had children, they were older. My daughter was born on the council. And so I would bring her because I still was working in the state in the national department. So I would bring her to City Hall when I was on maternity leave. And she was at all the community meetings with me because I nursed her actually 2 years, almost 2 years. And so pumping, and on the weekends, I refused to pump because I was like, I'm not pumping, I'm taking her with me. So she was known as a council baby. And then just 2 years ago, the council person a young lady from another district came on, she ended up bringing her child to the council and making the kind of policy changes to have spaces for people to be able to breastfeed or pump or whatever they needed to do. And I think that, that made a difference. And particularly in the environment that I was in, where it was majority white males, But balancing that home and being elected office and whatever else you're doing, I think we women as women have the ability to juggle multiple things at one time and still be successful. I did all my food prepping because I believe in healthy eating on Sundays for the week, getting those uniforms together, for the week for my kids, and training their father certain things that had to happen. But I think it just helps encourage other young people, despite being, married or looking at a future for children, that gives them an opportunity.
Well,
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Cara. You were going to say
wanted
something.
to follow up, and I don't know if this is where you were going, Regina, but it was something, I think, Sheila, you made this point that more and more women are getting involved in politics. And I know for me, I was similar to you, Sheila. I didn't really understand all of the political aspects of things. I just got involved because I cared. And so, but from a sister's perspective, and we always on this Good Girlfriends want to talk about how we can support our sisters. I think it's important for women to know exactly what it looks like to show up. Sometimes if we did want to support, we may not know all the practical things to support. I know we need money. I know campaigns need money. I know campaigns need volunteers to make phone calls and knock on doors when we used to do that, I guess.
Yes, that's still important. That's still important. It's called touching voters.
We know all those practical things. And I heard Alicia mention she had sister friends that showed up helping to take care of her children. And you just mentioned being, mothers and helping her with outfits. But what are there any other practical things that sisters can do to show up for political candidates so we can support you on your
I think it's important. I'm glad you asked that. I think and I don't know if anyone said this, but when you think about the political landscape and how instrumental Black women were, and Blondel talked about how she'd been involved in going to all these Democratic conventions for so many years. Like, we as Black women show up for everyone else.
That's right.
We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be dynamic. We can hold people down and hold people accountable. But only now are we seeing this surge of Black women running for office, and not just running for office, those positions that make it possible for me to call the Department of Motor Vehicles and realize that the management and Department of Motor Vehicles for the state of New York are Black women. Or when it comes to Black women enterprises, that there are Black women. So when you say showing up, yes, the phone calls are there. Yes, the money is there, but the networks that I think we form amongst ourselves, like if someone in your circle says, I'm thinking about running for office, like, you have connections, Kara, put her in touch, because I'm telling you something, it doesn't matter what state you're in. My daughter attends Morgan State University in Baltimore. I had a problem. I called Rep. Joseline Pena-Melnick to help me with an issue. So many, because I'm like, if it's New York, I know I got my daughter covered, but she's in another state. So those networks that you have in state and out of state and across the country, to Karen, Jeanette, work your networks and lift up sisters all throughout your states. If it's Pennsylvania, if it's Maryland, if it's California, like, we have Black women in all pockets and areas. And we have sisters who are in the human resources office trying to get their SNAP benefits, to the person whose name as a comptroller, your name is on all the checks, right? So we have, I would say, when we show up, it's holding our sisters accountable. Like, if someone says they want to run for office and they can't stand people or they're petty, like, you got to hold that sister accountable. Like, do you really want to do that? You don't even like people. Why are you running for office? Like, what are your motivations? So and I have, I'll give you another example and then I'll shut up. When Biden announced that Harris was going to be his running mate, I somehow called two sisters and activated a network of Black women throughout the state of New York that, we're so comfortable. Let's create the New York State Black Women for Biden Harris. And we were able to raise almost $50,000.
Wow.
Just Black women raising money. And I said, we can buy the bags and stuff, but let's show them yes, we'll come out and vote, but we have the money too. And we can dictate where our money goes and who we're going to support.
I want to use the money as a segue. In my first race, I raised $89,000 for a citywide race. So I came in a close 6, which doesn't count. In my second race, I raised $200,000, but I spent $250,000. So I actually entered my first term in debt. You cannot be a candidate if you can't raise money. And you have to have some of your own skin in the game, which means you have to bring some of your own resources to the table, I believe, before you can or should reach to, starting from elementary school and everybody you've met along the way, asking for dollars. Now, here's the sad commentary, and at least for the city of Philadelphia, I would say, and I haven't now been going since December 2019, but when I did an assessment in 2015 of my contributors, 60 to 70% of my contributors were white men. Wow. And who do you think gave me the least money of all groups? African American women. Sad commentary. That's not a myth, that's factual. And so it's incumbent on us, I know, where we have to, it calls for a lot of education, where volunteers and supporters have to be informed about why money is so very, very important. You simply can't run a race, I don't care how low it is on the totem pole, without having resources in the bank. It's like you need to buy gas to get the car down the road to get to the finish line. And so having a well-financed campaign is exceedingly important. It is increasingly difficult with all of the contribution rules that continue to get on the books. And so I underscore money because we as Black women don't do enough of it. And the flip side of that is that I'm pleased to say when I guess it was 2012, 2011, I had a campaign crisis, which as time permits, I'll certainly get into it. But I had to really raise $300,000 to offset the campaign crisis and have enough money just for election day. We've always needed anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 strictly for election day. So in addition to raising money, you have to have a network of folks who come with different skill sets who may be willing to offer you in-kind services because they believe in you enough and want to see you get to the finish line. My theme is nothing can happen without money in the bank, and we as Black women can and should do better.
And I just add that just one quick thing to that is that, when we have access and we have relationships, it is incumbent upon us to open those doors for other Black women. I mean, I've seen it happen too many times where someone has the access, someone has the relationships, someone knows the people to know, right? The people with the money or otherwise, and don't provide that pathway for other Black women. And that's a problem. And it can't happen. You can't raise the money. You can't win without that access. So normally. So
I would be curious though to see how much Black women contributed to, for example, the Biden-Harris race, right? Because I think that more Black women are becoming politically involved.
Sure.
Right. And so as we become more involved and aware, right, then we understand the need for us to contribute to different campaigns, to be involved. So white men understood that different than we did when you were running, Blondel, right? So they know the importance of having skin in the game politically, and money is how, and also volunteering, but money is how you get some skin in the game. And so now we are, when I say we, I mean Black women, of course, are starting to understand that and learning how to leverage, right, our political capital, right, our financial capital, our relationship capital, which is the same as political. So I think that that pendulum is swinging in a different direction now.
I agree with that 2000%. And I believe Obama was the game changer because I don't remember the percentages, but he was able to get folks like my mother to write.
Mine too.
Yes,
mine too.
Yes.
Which
Well,
was
my mother too.
And it was those small dollar amounts that really, in many ways,
Yes.
And some would argue, put him over the top. Obama's campaign was the game changer in terms
Yes.
of awakening Black folks to the notion that you too can make a contribution, no matter how small it is.
And then, you know, and this is another thing. I donate. I looked at last year how much I spent in donations to other candidates. And what I would do is this, because, you know, political, there are rules, like I can't donate from the campaign. Like, right, there's a lot of rules. So I would donate personally, but I would make it weekly or monthly. Because if I knew the campaign was 6 to 8 months, I would say $100. And you know what, by the end of it, you know, for 6 months, that's $600 that candidate got out of me. And now in New York City Council, there are so many races, there's so many Black women that are running. And so what I've been doing is I've been doing 25 here, 25 there. And we have matching dollars in New York City. So wonderful. You get, it's 8 to 1. Wow. So, you know, I donate $20, you know, times 8, that's $160 that candidate is going to get. And if I do that monthly, you know, there's a cap, right? But I think, and this is the thing, I realized that now I'm showing up on all of these lists and people are calling me for money because, oh, she donates. But I think it's what you said, you got to have money in the bank. And for a lot of Black women, it's harder to raise. So all the women most of the women, I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but I will donate $20, and it'll multiply. And that's my investment in making sure Black women succeed.
Yes.
I agree. I was going to say that I agree with the analysis that Blondel made about more white males than anybody. The one thing that I always subscribed to was, and I think this helped me to be able to raise money, is that, well, first starting off grassroots. So anytime you look at my financial campaign statements, my reports, you will see that the majority of the money that I've raised was grassroots, even if it ended up being in the millions, which I had to do, raise millions of dollars when you run citywide for mayor. But the other thing that I find is that if you look at for example, Martin O'Malley, who was the mayor of Baltimore, and I was city council president when he became governor and I finished out his term, and those people that I went to who supported him, if you look at how much they gave him versus what they gave me, it was less. So people would give the males more than they would give females. Now in Baltimore, part of the challenge is they're not, and this is where we need to create more African-American companies who do fundraising. Yes. Because Candace knows this, Regina might know it, I don't know if Cara knows it, but there are not many fundraisers in Baltimore, in the Baltimore area or Maryland. And
of color, right? Of color.
Of color. And so those that, for example, my fundraiser is a woman, Rachel Rice Consultant. I've had her for a long time. She's excellent. They do the best reporting and everything. So they're competitors. So because of some underlining political things here in Baltimore, the other person who's a woman who does fundraising for certain candidates, if I like you as a candidate, but you have this particular person as your fundraiser, I might not contribute to. Wow. I'll write a check to you, but I might not contribute to your campaign because of who your fundraiser is, because of some straining issues here in the politics of Baltimore and the control that certain fundraisers have. And that's why we have an African-American fundraiser here, a woman here who actually worked on my staff who does marketing. But once you find someone that you're comfortable with, that you have to do those calls with, and that you rely heavily on, it's hard to change over. But we really got to create more companies to do fundraising. And my Rachel Rice, who's my fundraiser, has me get on the phone or work with new candidates about how to make calls, because you have to call. You have to do a lot of calling, and a lot of people don't like doing calling. And I'll get on a list, and I might remember them, I might not remember them, but I'll make that call. So I've been able to train some young people who hate doing those calls to beg for money, and methods and how to do that. But fundraising is a big aspect. But what I found when you look at the numbers are that people tend to give more to males than they do to females. The dollar amount is so different.
That's factual. That's factual.
Have
And
a,
fundraising is a science. It really is a science, not an art. It's a science, and they're very strict methodologies one needs to follow to be successful. And it's freaking hard work.
It is.
I know that's right.
we have,
No other way around it.
we have a question in the chat from Alicia and Jeanette's line sister Carmen. She said, do you think Black women support federal elections and not local?
I think people don't, it's not just Black women, it's all people don't realize how local politics or local elections affect them much more, 100% more than federal elections affect them. So I wouldn't say it's just Black women. I just think all people don't realize the difference in the levels of government and what affects them more.
That politics is local. At the end of the day, politics is local.
Yeah.
It is, and the
Listen, I
reason
say
why
that
white
all the
males-
time. That is like my claim to fame. Whenever I talk about it, you know, whenever we have elections, whenever I post about voting, I'm always saying to people, contact me. The sheriff's office, the judges, the school board, because those are the ones that people overlook. And those are the ones that sometimes can make a major difference in how policies are taking place. I mean, Candace and I talk about that all the time. So I tell people to inbox me and I'll give you my thought processes around that. I was going to ask a question. I know that there's another question in there. I'm going to get to that of Sharon Barnes. She has a candidate in New York City who's running for mayor. And so she's going to talk about that. But you all talked about being moms.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I find a lot of times, or I have heard, it's probably less likely, but it seems as though sometimes we always have to think about motherhood before we run. Now, you know, because men don't have to think about that. You know what I mean? They just do what they want, do what they're going to do. But a lot of times, and this has been my challenge. This has been a challenge for me in terms of running for several things. I'm a single mom as well. But it's always like, oh, and it's funny, I just had this conversation tonight because someone is pushing me to run for something else and they're saying, oh, Regina. And I was like, oh, but I have this and I have that and I have this. And they said, oh, and you're a mom. And I was like, yes, you know, but they're like, but because you're a mom, you can juggle multiple things. And that's true. But, and Sheila said, Jasmine, well, just because I know her name, Jasmine was born in the council and, you know, Councilwoman Blondel, you had your 3-year-old. Alicia said she had her people that supported her and helping that. So tell us about your thought process. Did you have a lot of thought process about motherhood when you were thinking about running?
Please let me jump in because I could talk about that forever.
Okay.
And so what I will offer up is the following. It's important that you first establish what boundaries you demand when it comes to taking care of your child, because everyone will be tempted to violate the boundaries. And if you're not clear and precise, that, for example, I would receive calls 7:30 in the morning on a regular basis as I'm driving my daughter to school. And first of all, your children are always watching. So it's important how we conduct ourselves while we take care of business. I would nicely say to callers, I am happy to speak with you after 8 a.m., but right now I need 30 minutes with my daughter as I drive her to school. Please allow me to call you back at 8 a.m. So boundaries are very, very, very important. Secondly, your staff have to understand that you want boundaries as well. I'm pleased to say that as a member of Philadelphia City Council, I missed no dance rehearsals, no dance performances, no cross-country meets, doctor's appointment. It became her schedule was woven into my schedule. And so I had a scheduler who understood that Brielle was first, second, and third. And so boundaries are important. Having a scheduler who understands what your priorities are is important. And having a network, I had the village, and we had one of our sessions was devoted to the village. I'm thankful, eternally thankful to the village. My mother and my husband, the sadness for me is that my marriage is one of the casualties of me being in council for 20 years. And that's not anything I'm proud of, it's my reality. Bottom line, it is absolutely possible to do all of it. We just have to be clear with what matters to us, what our values are, and then communicate that to those around you. And so that's what I've offered up to Catherine Gilmore Richardson, who ran with 2 toddlers. And she calls her third child, bonus child, who's an adolescent. But she worked things through with her husband. They developed a schedule. Scheduling is just, scheduling is a bear. But if you don't get that right, then everything else becomes chaos.
Yeah, I have to say ditto. Well, I didn't have my children until after I was already in public office, but Blondel was right. Setting the priorities. I never missed a PTA meeting, dance recitals, soccer, all swimming, you name it. You know, both kids were involved in so many activities. Early on, and even during my move or new chapters in public office, my husband also was the partner in the process as well. So that helped. Now, keep in mind, my husband did not want me to go beyond city council. He did not want me to run for city council president. And so he and I ended up divorcing, but we never missed a beat as relates to making our children the priority. And scheduling is correct. I had one of the best schedulers that anybody could ever had. But not only did I have to schedule and make sure that I had my kids as a priority, but I had to make myself a priority as well. Mm-hmm. I'm an avid exerciser. And so my scheduler knew, aside from things that my kids had, that if she did not schedule my hour and a half workout every day, wow. And I wasn't getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning every day either, that I would blow off a meeting if I didn't, because I had to have my mental state. And even to this day, I don't miss my workout. Well, I don't have to deal with kids now, but
I commend you.
Except for my college student son that still's at Morgan that needs to come out, but that's never here nor there. But
congratulations, so, that's hard.
So you have to balance.
Wait, don't let me get started on Morgan State.
I ain't gonna let you get started, because don't let me get started on Morgan State. let me leave it there. Okay, let me leave Morgan State, Black Historic College right there. Let me leave it there. But yeah, so juggling all of that, but also their father also played a big role in that as well. You know, we didn't end up staying together, but the kids were the priority. And I think that helped, along with having, you know, my sister, their aunt, and when my mother was living, you know, having my mother, but, you know, it was us. And then of course, you know, there's other perks when you move up in office. You know, as city council president, you know, I had a driver, which helped, and they ended up kind of being.
You got a driver?
Of my yeah, you have a driver. I had a retired police officer who was a driver when I was city council president, and yep, and so he ended up teaching, because he did a better job than Thomas, my daughter how to drive, and my son how to. I mean, he became part of the family. And the same as when I became mayor, you have executive protection, and all those executive protection, you know, got to know and experience my kids, but we still maintain doing the things that parents are responsible for and handling, you know.
Allow me to tell a 2-minute story about drivers. I drove my daughter to school every morning, and then I would come back home and my staffer and I would start our day. Fox 29 TV followed me for a week, taking my daughter to school in a city-owned vehicle. And they do the chase, they run you down with their mics. And so they did on City Hall one day. And he said, we have coverage of you taking your daughters to school in your city car. You do. Can we have an interview? You can. Meet me upstairs in my office. So I conduct the interview with them. And he says, do you have anything else to say? I said, absolutely. I kept a major confidential files in my bottom left-hand drawer. I pulled out a memo that I got approval from a day one in city council. It's called an administrative exemption, allowing me to take my daughter to school in my city-owned vehicle from square one. And now he turns beet red because he really, really wants to run with the story. So he did run with the story. And at the end of the interview, they showed the memo on the TV screen, but she's entitled to take her daughter to school anyway, because they discovered along the way the mayor of the city of Philadelphia was doing the same, and another white woman from another major city department was taking her son to school as well. So they attempted the double standard until he discovered that the mayor was doing the same. And in that instance as well, I was simply unapologetic. Yes, I do. And I said, if I can give my daughter, if I give the city 9, 10, 11 hours a day, I could give my daughter 30 minutes in the morning taking her to school. So it really, goes back to your convictions and your values and that which you're going to be unapologetic about.
Wow.
Alicia, were you gonna jump in?
Well, I just remember, like, when I was running for office, I had for some reason, no, I was in office. I had more time with my girls in the morning because I made it so that I dictated my schedule, like two other women just said. And I remember one morning in the car doing Nyla, my youngest, she's 10 now, doing her kindergarten work in the car outside of the school because she had some project to do. And it was her big sister, me, and we were all in the car cutting out pieces of magazines and the glue stick and doing it all in the car, just so, because the things you do as mothers, right? I was like,
yes.
You just make it happen. You just make it happen.
Yes.
And I will say this about my daughters. With the youngest, her teacher at the time I think maybe second grade, the teacher said to me, she's kind of bossy. And I was like, I think that's my fault. Because she sees her mother all day long doing this.
That's right. Just go ahead and own it.
Just go own it, right? Right.
Cara, were you going to say something? I was going to ask about their faith, but go ahead if you want to.
No, let's keep going. We'll go for a few more minutes, then we're going to close out soon.
With Candace. Okay. So I want to ask you all because, because I know Sheila, every time she ran for every single office, she was a stewardess at Bethel Church. She talked about her Bishop Bryant, which was her pastor, and Reverend Cecilia, which was her first lady, and then eventually Bishop Reed. So anyway, but every first Sunday, Sheila was a stewardess at the church. And every first Sunday, I don't care what campaign she was on, she was serving at the church.
Yeah, wearing that
every first Sunday with her white. Right. She didn't have on, she wasn't campaigning. She wasn't. And look, and she didn't. I remember one time I leaned over to her because I was a steward, and I leaned over to her. I leaned back to her and I said something about the campaign. She's like, Regina, I am a stewardess right now, and talk to me about that after church. And she was serious about it. She was just about her work. But I also think that, I just want to hear all y'all stories around, the grounding, because I do think, and I'm not talking about a specific religion, I'm talking about the grounding, whatever that grounding may be. That grounding may not be organized religion, but what that grounding is to you. So
I wouldn't be if not for God. If nothing but God. I was thinking earlier today, sometimes you have to take a minute and just be grateful. And I was feeling the schedule was crazy today. And I looked at the schedule and I was like, but God is going to get me through. So every day, I'm just grateful for the position I have. I'm grateful to serve. And then some days I don't know, I'm like, how did I get here? And it's all him. And my faith, and I tell people, as much as I can, it's like what you see is all him. I give him all the credit, all the glory that he brought me here. And I will say that where I worship at AME Zion, I had to tell the pastor, please stop announcing that I'm here. Because I would I kid you not, I would come out of the pew and there'd be a line of people waiting like I had office hours in church. No, you can come to my office. You have to, just like how we have to have barriers with our children. My faith and my praise in this house, I needed to be sacred. I'm not working. So, and my fellowship with my community at Mount Moriah, they understand that now and they leave me alone. So all to him, all of it.
Yeah, I would say, go ahead.
Please, Mayor, please.
Oh, I was going to say, I have to ditto what you're saying, because I know it's only by the grace of God. And through my political career, which has been up and down, people can look at what they hear or see and take it wherever they want. But I know it's only by the grace of God that I was able to do all that I've done, as well as where I am today. And I know that through, and I keep bringing up Bishop Brian and Cecilia, even I knew Frank Reed in Boston before. That's how I met Reverend Brian and Cecilia, because I grew up Episcopal. But coming to Bethel and reconnecting my faith in God and through the women's ministry, and then understanding the God within me, really has kept me over the years. And I know it's only by the grace of God. And I agree with Alicia when she said, people who come to me at church, even now, and I'm like, I'm not in public office now, but I still, but I still take the information now, or give them my card and say, either email me or contact me. But when I'm worshiping, I'm worshiping. And so reach out to me tomorrow. And then I'll see what I can do to help you out. But yeah, it's only by the grace of God. And I know he laid that foundation. That's why through my chapters in public office, some of the impact that I have been able to make in Baltimore, we went through multiple mayors in Baltimore City where the population was over 1 million, down to 600,000-700,000. Now it's even less than that, where people left the city because of crime. That it took the vision God laid in myself to reduce crime to its lowest that it had ever been in 30 years. Wow. And now it's still back up, to having serving under, during that time, a deficit. You're talking about the recession now, which is actually worse than it was when I was mayor. But during that recession, to be able to do more with less, it's only by the grace of God. And so I have to give all praises to God. And I'm glad that relationship is within me.
I don't know how you can do this work and not be grounded spiritually. I simply don't know how you can do it because of the demands that never end. I often say it's 9 days a week, 36 hours a day, period. And I wanted to do a selfless plug here. I've and this is the first time I'm saying this out loud to a group of women. So this is a real leap for me. But I've decided to reduce to writing and I don't want to use the word memoir because that has other expectations, but I am 160 pages in with what I hope to be a self-help. I don't want to call it manual because it's too academic. Self-help something for women who are thinking about running for elected office. That's actually one of the things I decided to do during quarantine and COVID. And one of the chapters in there, I am devoting to the Black church and how important one's spiritual grounding is essential if you're going to be able to weather the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it all comes when you're an African-American female in elected office. And the title of it, God willing, is going to be Walking on a Tightrope Backwards with High Heels on Blindfolded and Getting It All Right. I don't know how you can do it without faith. I just don't.
Wow. Well, that's a great way to end this part of our discussion. And I just have to say, I'm blown away by this whole discussion tonight. This is powerful. And at this point, we usually highlight an African-American female-owned business. So we're not necessarily going to highlight a business, but we are going to highlight an initiative that Candace Dotson Reed has, which ties right into our discussion, I think. So I'm going to turn it over to Candace at this point to tell us about Elevate Maryland.
Thank you for that, and for this opportunity to talk about Elevate. Elevate Maryland is a podcast. Mayor Dixon was on our podcast at one point, and what we'd like to do is elevate voices that are not generally heard in Maryland, and also elevate folks who are working on solutions to the biggest problems that we're dealing with in our state. And so, very fortunate to host the podcast. We usually do everything from the gubernatorial races to, sort of the more local things and people who are working on problems in the city or in the counties. And happy to, please check it out. It's elevatemarylandpodcast.com. I'm sorry, it's elevatemdpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. And we really like to, we sometimes get in trouble for our stance on things, but we really like to talk about equity and problem solving, whether it be in education or housing or economic development or health disparities. So please check us out and let us know what you think. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the show.
Awesome. I am a regular listener, and
thank you.
I encourage, even if you don't live in this area, to listen in. I mean, you've had national folks on there as well. So it's not just for Maryland. So I encourage everyone out there to listen to it and learn. So
I appreciate that. And please check out Mayor Dixon's show. Mayor Dixon's show is one of our top 5 shows. And we've been doing this for 3 years now.
Awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't know it was one of your top shows, but I enjoyed being there, and the questions and the discussion was excellent. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can you write that in the chat so we can join the podcast?
Sure can. And
Yeah.
we interview folks from all over the country. So if y'all want to come on, please join us. We love
when do the podcast air? What days?
So we usually do podcasts every other week. But when we're in election season, we do it a little bit more frequently, but every other week. And the schedule is also online and on the Facebook page. So I'll put it in the chat for sure.
I have an idea, Mayor Dixon. We could talk about Morgan State. What do they need to do to get it right?
Lord, now you can't get me in trouble on the podcast.
Don't get me started.
No.
And by the way, I work at UMBC. Send your babies my way. Come on.
My son wanted to go
Alicia,
to a historically Black college. So he first went to Hampton, and then he came back to his father came from South Carolina to come up to Baltimore to Morgan, and because he was in mostly white institutions his whole life. My daughter went to school in New York, LIM, in marketing and fashion. She loved it, the experience. She did it in 4 years, undergrad, no debt.
Stop it, Mom. Stop, Mom.
She met a New Yorker. He's a high school teacher, really great guy. Actually, they have this young love something that they do. I forgot what it's called, but but his name is Adrian Brooks, and he's a great young man. I really enjoy him. So, but
Good,
we'll talk about that Morgan later.
I could talk for days about Morgan.
And
Blondel,
Alicia, if you ever need anything, I mean, I'm only 30 minutes away.
She's great. We just got the word. She's last week after the fight, and I even had to call the congressman and Quincy in for me. She's graduated in May, so.
Oh, okay, good. Well, he's on the board, so that's good.
Oh God.
Blondel, my baby is up by you at Villanova.
Is that right?
Yeah,
What year?
junior.
Very good. Not far. In fact, she's Villanova is 5 minutes from the school that Jeanette Harris and my daughter went to, Agnes Irving School for Girls.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, I know that school well. Yes.
Ooh, small world.
Small world.
Well, thank you, ladies. I hope that you all will join us again, our guests.
Please.
We have lots
Excellent.
of interesting topics, and if you all want to come back and continue this conversation, I'm sure we could go in a whole lot more different directions just talking about women in politics. But feel free to join us. You have our contact information. Every Thursday we're here, and we would love for you all to join us. But just know that you blessed so many tonight. I was blessed. I'm always blessed by these conversations, but there are so many people that are going to be blessed out there. I think we heard loud and clearly that Black women, we need to support with our dollars. We need to get out there and support with our volunteer efforts. And we need to get out there and support our Black sisters that are putting themselves out there to run for office. This is not an easy task. I mean, my hat goes off to all of you all for even putting your name in the ring, let alone running successful campaigns and being out there and serving. So let's get out there and do it. Let's support our candidates, and as Alicia said, let's hold them to task and make sure that they are qualified candidates, but let's make sure we support them as well. So thank you, ladies, for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
guys.
having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend. And everyone, please, if you have seen any of our episodes, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to it and share this with your friends and family. We are trying to bless people. That is our whole goal here. We're just trying to be a blessing to people and to get information out there to support sisters and help build up Black women, because we know how important we are to this whole entire world.
Thank you.
Fortify Black women, we can change this world. So
Yes, we are. We can.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank
you.
Thank you. Great show.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
so much. Have a
Until next time.
Yes.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Oh,
Didn't shut the live off yet.
did we turn it off?
Hello.
Are we supposed to leave?
No,
No.
not yet.